crafty friends. Today we're going to be making this gorgeous quilted sweater together. I will just do a disclaimer. I got my measurements wrong, so all the correct measurements for cutting will be down in the description box below. You know, we're only human, and I'd rather leave my mistakes in than not. So hopefully you enjoy and make along with me. Let's get into it. So today I really want to make one of those quilted sweaters. So we're going to start by making a sawtooth quilt block. I have pre-cut out, but what you'll need today is a rotary cutter or a pair of scissors. I'm going to use this fancy triangle cutter shaper upper thing that I've had for years, but you can use a quilting square or again just a quilting ruler or a ruler, whichever you prefer. I need a pen for marking. I'm also going to use some pins. These are just some magic pins. I couldn't tell you which ones, but they're the blue ones. Fabric wise, I have pre-cut, so I've got a 5 inch by 5 inch square, 4 3-inch squares of this one, so this is going to be my star colour, and then I've got 8 3x3s in my outer colour, backing colour, whatever you'd like to call it. So first off, we're going to start with the stars. I've done one just because I was double checking that I'd got it correct. So to make your half square triangles, we're going to take the first 3-inch square and the second. So one of your main fabric, your star fabric, one of your backing fabric. And I'm just going to mark down the centre, corner to corner on those. And then pin them together. We are going to square these off at a smaller size after we've stitched, but I just like a little bit of leeway. So we're going to repeat that, so we have 4 of these paired together. And once we've stitched those, that's going to make our 8 points of our star. So again, marking that down the centre, corner to corner, and pinning each side, doing our best to line up the edges to make sure it's a nicely neat and lined up. Last one. And again, it doesn't matter which side you mark these at either, and it doesn't have to. I'm using a heat erase pen, but you can just use a pencil. It's on the back, you won't see it. Try not to use something like a Sharpie or anything like that though, because that will bleed through. Okie dokie. So first step with these is we're going to take this to the machine, and you're going to sew 1/4 of an inch down each side of your line, and then we'll be back. Okay, so now we're back. We're going to trim away any of our excess threads. Excess threads. And then we are going to take each one and cut them directly down that line that we drew earlier. Okay. Just popping them to the side. Okay, so now we've got those trimmed. I'm going to use this gadget I've got. However, I will show you the other way to do it if you don't have one of these. But you just line, that's your seam allowance. So I'm going to line that up against my stitch line, and I'm going to just chop that excess because I want them to be 2.5 inches finished. So I'm going to do that for all of these, and then I'll show you how you would do it with your other one. Okay, and if you don't have one of these, when we iron them out, that's when you'd shape it up. So I can show you how you do that once we've pressed open the seams. Okie dokie. So now I have got my iron on ready. So I'm going to bring out my ironing mat and move over those, and we're going to press open all these seams. So the important thing here is that we're going to press open this seam. We're going to put a little bit of heat on that first. My textiles teacher once told me that if you press the seam first, you get a better thing. And then we're going to press this open that way. And don't worry, we'll get rid of those dog ears in the end. Okay. So we're just going to rinse and repeat on all 8 of these half square triangles. This is one of the super easy ones in my opinion, and there are a number of ways you can do this. I've chosen this way just because I find it easier, but you know, the world is your oyster. I say this a lot. So this is where you'd square up if you hadn't used your little triangle tool. So we want it to be about 2.5 inches. So I'm just gonna take off these dog ears. I'm gonna use my fabric scissors because I just feel like it'll be a little bit easier. And then we're gonna piece together all that. I think we need to just size those corner pieces as well. Fingers crossed I've got all my measurements right. I did not do a test run of this, but we'll learn together. And you know, mistakes are made. We're only human, and if we do need to shave some off later, we can. It's not the worst case scenario. I think a lot of time people don't try quilting because they think you have to get it perfect. Yes, you know, you want your seams to line up perfectly every time, but the reality is they don't. not always, and there are seasoned quilters in the community that will also not have seams that are lined up perfectly. So the important part is that you've made something and you've enjoyed making it. Okie dokie. Right. We will just take these and square them off to 2.5 by 2.5 inches. So that's 2. Oh, so 2.5. Turn it. 2.5. I must say, I used to just use my larger quilting rulers doing this when I very first started sewing or making up blocks and whatnot, and I will say that this is one of the better. I have the 4x4 and I think the 6x6 quilting square, and they come in clutch quite often, if I do say so myself. Okay, last one, and we should be able to pop into place, and then we can piece. Okay, so placement of your squares. We're going to pop these to the side. We're going to grab, so this is our centerpiece. This, if you've got directional fabric, that's where you want to make sure that it is the right way up and the way you want it. Then you're going to take your 8 half square triangles, and we are popping them in this orientation. So you'll see it start to come together. And then you have here we are. So that is essentially your star block. Now, when it comes to piecing together, what we're going to do is we're going to sew this one to this one, and you sew along the edge with 1/4 inch. This one to this one, and then this one to this one. And we're going to do those 2 rows, these 2 rows, and then we're going to sew this one to this one, and this one to this one along those edges. Then we're going to come back and we will go with the next step. Okay, so now we're back. I'm just going to move that one out of the way, and we're going to trim excess threads. Again, just get them out of the way. I always overcompensate with my threads because I used to get all the threads chewed up at the end of my stitches, and I've learned that if I have a little bit of a tail and hold on to it before I put my foot down, that usually helps. Okay, let's grab our ironing board back, and we're going to open up these seams. So we'll start with these 2 small ones first. Let's zoom out just a tad so you can see what's going on. So, and then we're gonna Open that nice and neat. Now with these ones, I'm going to flatten them out again just to try my very best to keep them from bulking up later on down the line. There we are. So we've got one side. See how fun that looks. I'm super glad I went for these colours. You'll see I've picked like a creamy off-white jumper to stitch it onto, and I just think it'll give it the pop that it needs. But don't worry, we will go into how we're going to stitch it on when we get to that point. See, you can see my point on this one's fantastic. This one, not so hot, but it's okay. No big deal. So with these ones, for this side, I'm going to iron it to the dark side. And again, this side, but for the middle I'm going to flatten it out, so open up the seams if we can get it. Like I say, if you want to, if you have chosen a different block and you want to do your seams a completely different way, that is absolutely up to you. It really is personal preference. Sometimes I don't care at all, but for today, like I said, I don't want it to be super bulky, so we are going to try and pay attention to the way I'm ironing the seams out. Okay, and then last one. Okay, now back to our centerpiece. What we need to do now is stitch this bit to this bit. To be honest, what I might do is make this a quarter, maybe a 4x4. Yes. I'm just going to chop this down. Are we? Let's go 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, this is 4.5 by 4.5, so we'll do this and hope for the best. I'll probably get this wrong, and this is what I mean by, you know, trial and error. Okie dokie. So for these, we're going to stitch this to this, and this side to this side, so straight down, and then we'll be back and we should be able to stitch these two on, and we'll have a full quilt block. Fingers crossed. Okay, so we're back. We're going to open up these seams, so ironing mat out once again. And this time I'm ironing my seams away from the center. if I can. In fact, no, we're not. We're going to go to the centre. Yep. Get myself a bit confused, look. To the centre that way. Gosh. Okay, and you'll see what I mean by we're reducing as much bulk from this, from the back as we possibly can. Right, last step for the block is now we're going to take it back to the machine once more, and we're going to stitch this piece to this piece and this piece to this piece across the bottom, trying our best to line up your seams when you can. Obviously things aren't perfect, they never are. Then we'll be back and we'll talk about how we're going to stitch this onto our jumper itself. Okay, so now with a bit of luck we should be able to open this up and it's going to be beautiful. And with this one, I'm pushing the seams inwards this time, not outwards, okay? So in towards the centre. Oh, it does look pretty. Now then, if we can, we've got to try and get this bit, look, where we can do it to the centre, you see. Perfect. Again, the seams aren't perfect, you know, but unless you're pointing them out to everybody, they are not going to pay any attention to your seams. Beautiful. Okay. Move this out of the way. Now, what we're going to do first is I'm going to neaten up this edge. This one's pretty solid, but we're going to start with this side. And I'm not going to worry too much about the size. I'm just going to use my straight seams as a guide. And I'm just going to chop to make a really nice neat edge. And then from there we're going to use that straight edge to make sure we're lining up. Just like I said, we're just trying to neaten up these sides. Not too much, just a tiny bit, just so they're nice and straight. We don't want a wonky block. Doesn't matter too much. Like I say, if your seams aren't perfect, it's not a big deal. But what we do want is for it to be nice and straight along the edges when we're sewing it. Okay, one last edge. And then we're going to hopefully stitch this onto our jumper. And it's going to look super cute and exactly how we imagined. Right, so we have a finished quilt block. She's all straightened up, squared off, looking beautiful. Wonderful. So I just need a quick drink. Now I'm going to grab my jumper. In fact, I'm going to move some bits out of the way because I don't want loads of stray threads. Move the cut block out of the way and we'll grab our jumper. So this is the jumper I've picked. Again, it's a cheap one from Primark, £6, and the fabric was already in my stash, but you can most definitely do this with scraps, so it could be a super cheap project. And what we're going to do is we're going to place our star. Now, I tend to eyeball things. If you want to get out a measuring tape and make sure it's absolutely perfect, that is absolutely up to you. But I'm looking at that and that looks pretty darn good to me. Sticking it on, you can either use your pins, or like me, I'm just going to use a stick and spray once again, just because then I know it's not going anywhere at all. So I'm just going to fold that back and secure that into place. A little bit more on this side, and I will just add a couple of pins just to make sure in the corners. Make sure you're only getting one side of your jumper. You don't want to pin it together because then you'd have an unwearable jumper. So again, just those corners. Now, to secure this onto my sweatshirt, I'm going to use a zigzag stitch, and I'm going to go over my raw edges just like you would if you were overlocking it. I think that's the best way to stop the fraying. However, I don't think it will be awful if it's threaded a little bit. It might frayed a little bit, it might give it some extra oomph, but for me, I'm just going to use a white cotton and I'm going to zigzag stitch all around the edge. I mentioned before, I'm not going to quilt this down, but you could do decorative hand quilting, you could choose to quilt it. I think it's enough on its own. So I'm going to zigzag stitch that. Make sure that you are only stitching the front side. You don't want to stitch your sweatshirt together, and we'll be back. Okay, so I'm back from the sewing machine. I will admit that was very tricky, but I managed to sew it on without sewing the front to the back, which I'm actually quite impressed by myself, to be honest. So I'm just going to cut off the threads. Here, and then we'll turn it inside out, check we've got all the threads on the inside, and that is it. So threads on the inside, turn it back inside out. And there we go. We have a really fun quilted sweater. I am going to quickly take my iron across it just to make it look pretty. And there you go. A super sweet, practical jumper. Let's just zoom you out a bit. Oh, I love that. I love the colours. I love the way it's turned out. And I got one thing off my Pinterest board. Okay, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. We've got a few ideas. I've got loads of ideas. I'm having so much fun. And it would be great to have you come back. Okay, thank you. Bye.